again, you're a Republican, so like that's odd that you would do that, but...
Why is that odd?
I mean, you're supporting Donald Trump, the man who you openly admitted sexualizes his own children back in 2016 before suddenly changing.
And both of those things are facts. So why do you think it is? Why do we see, put the graph in your hand to the side for a second. Why do we see this interesting trend, given that trans-identified people are a really small percentage of the population? I'm sure you would agree.
Sure.
So why do we have this trend of trans-identified people, trans activists, committing assassinations and mass shootings?
I mean,
I
think it's incredibly simple. You report, I mean, mass shootings are, there's so many of them that take place in various different ways, shapes, and forms. And the ones you choose to report on are the ones that become like embedded in the public image. And so when you, for instance, like you did in that video, and I'm not expecting you to recall every single detail, I'm more interested in the ballpark. You named several alleged transgender mass shooters. And at the end of your list, you had to add non-mass shootings, examples of transgender people committing other crimes to like make your point, right? So I would argue it's not a trend. It's not a pattern of behavior. You're picking and choosing which anecdotes to make your point. And transgender people are such a small percentage of the population that literally any number of transgender people doing anything is going to throw off the statistics.
Well, but this is something that we've observed. It's like, I'm not making it up. We could go back to the Covenant shooting. We could go to the recent church shooting in Minnesota. We could talk about Charlie Kirk. There are many examples.
Well, Charlie Kirk was not shot by a trans person. He
was shot by a trans activist, by somebody who was dating a trans furry and was motivated by that, by his own testimony. What I would suggest is that there is a reason for this. It's not just random. Okay, when you've got trans activists and leftists generally who are looking at people like Charlie Kirk and saying that, you know, he's committing a genocide against the trans community. I've been accused of that many times. Or, you know, he's a danger, he's a threat to the trans community. Charlie Kirk got those accusations. I've gotten them many times, even though Charlie never did anything. He never did anything to the trans community. He was never any kind of threat. But when you have that kind of rhetoric directed at people, it doesn't take much for someone to go to the, well, if that's true, if this person's a threat against me, then I guess that justifies a violent reaction. And especially when you're talking about a community of people who are already deeply confused and deeply troubled to begin with, and self-destructive to begin with. And then when you go to that particular group of people and you tell them that, hey, you see these people over there, they're trying to commit a genocide against you. They're a threat to you. So, okay, and then when the shots start ringing out and you want me to believe that that's some sort of coincidence, sorry, I don't buy it.
So, okay, that's not the argument that I'm making. So, if that's your allegation, that people giving what I think you could argue, you could call those like death warranting labels, right? Like calling someone a genocider or calling someone a whatever is a label that is intended to give someone
license to kill that person.
Sure. Okay. So if that's the case, I mean, we've sat through you guys describing all of the left as like various disgusting sex perverts, groomers, things like that, which is interesting for your movement in general. But I've watched your show many, many times. You consistently refer to the left very broadly, not even just specific people, as groomers, as pedophiles, as predators, and have argued that pedophiles and such should be killed. Would that not therefore mean, by your own argument, that you are justifying the killing of left-wingers?
Where did I say that leftists in general are pedophiles?
That's it. It's just a broad label you use in your videos. I mean, we can pull it out. It's a broad. You absolutely refer to the leftists.
I've been much more
pedophiles,
specific.
pedophile defenders, things like that. Again, you're a Republican, so like that's odd that you would do that, but.
Why is that odd?
I mean, you're supporting Donald Trump, the man who you openly admitted sexualizes his own children back in 2016 before suddenly changing your position.
When was Donald Trump guilty of pedophilia?
No, I'm not saying he hasn't been found guilty of anything. I'm saying he's engaged in that behavior.
Okay.
And he's endorsed that behavior, more importantly.
He's endorsed pedophilia?
Wait, you said he's engaged in that behavior?
What are you talking about?
He specifically described his interest in walking into the Miss Teen USA changing rooms while they were changing. I would call that pedophilia, personally.
You started this by saying that I had accused the left of being pedophiles generally, which I have not done. What I have done, though, more specifically, I have said that, for example, leftists who insist upon or defend the practice of having drag queens perform for children.
Okay, so sticking with those people, should those people be killed, or are you endorsing rhetoric that would get those people killed?
They shouldn't be killed, they should be arrested. They should be arrested and put in prison. See, this is another fundamental difference between someone on the right and somebody on the left, usually, is I don't believe in extrajudicial killing at all. I believe in law and order. I believe in the police and enforcing our laws.
Well, I'm not supporting, I would never support extrajudicial killing. I'm opposed to that entirely. And I'm opposed to people killing conservatives as well. That seems...
Okay, well, I'm glad that you are. So we're on the same page on that. But it's much more likely to have somebody on the left. I mean, defund the police was something that existed on the left, not on the right. So the left is much more likely to take a position that law enforcement itself as a function is illegitimate and must be defunded. And if we do that, then all that's left, I mean, how are we going to enforce the law at that point? All that's left is to enforce it extrajudicially. But anyway, going back to the point, because you brought it up, when I have used the word groomer to refer to leftists, I have done it in specific cases where they are having drag queens perform for children, or where children themselves are dressing up like drag queens and performing for adults, or where children are being chemically castrated and sexually mutilated. In those cases, the adults involved are absolutely sexual abusers and groomers. Would you disagree with that?
I would disagree with that. I actually have a which part of it? Those are a variety of different...
Are those adults groomers who encourage that?
No. Who encourage any... I mean, there are a variety of different behaviors you gave.
Having adults perform in drag for children, that's not grooming?
If it's in sexual in nature, then that would absolutely be...
Isn't drag sexual in nature? Isn't that the definition of drag?
No, I've met a variety of...
You've been to very wholesome drag shows?
I know.
Bring Granny out to the drag show? I don't think so.
I mean, quite literally, I've watched drag shows at, like, old folks' homes and stuff like that, which...
You shouldn't do that either. Don't do that.
Regardless...
Don't do the drag for the kids. Don't do the drag for the grannies. Just don't do the drag.
Now you're grooming Granny, too?
Don't do that. Don't.
Oh, my God.
You brought up that point, though. You brought up the chemical... Why have drag queens around kids at all? Why do that? Because it's a goofy art form for the same reason you have any sort of whatever. I don't know, like...
What's the art?
It's performing. It's like playing a character. Just any old thing. I mean, I go up to Silverwood theme park. I'm sure a lot of Idaho people have been there. They have a show for kids that includes a lot of like sexual and inappropriate content, at least in my opinion. And I disagree with the content of the show. I think it's kind of disgusting. But in context, like, okay, they're doing a magic show and things like that. The magic part of it is not the problem. It's the weird like molester jokes and things like that I think are inappropriate. But you brought up...
We would agree on that. I think we found one area where we agree. That
I've always held that position. I think most people that I know hold that position. You brought up the chemical castration thing, and I happen to be a chemist, so I'm a little bit familiar with this. Do you know what chemical castration is? And like, could you describe just in the basic principles what that is compared to physical castration, compared to like an orchiectomy or something?
Yeah, chemical castration is using a drug that ultimately has the effect of sterilizing children.
What's the drug?
And
what does it do?
Lupron is one of the drugs.
Perfect. Lupron, leuprolide acetate's about a decapeptide, binds to, it's a superagonist for the GnRH hormone in your body. Essentially what it does is it spikes your body with that hormone signal to tell it to, basically it desensitizes your body to the production of sex hormones. Within a couple of weeks of going off of it, that process is reversible. Now you can argue there are a variety of other things that may or may not be irreversible.
Why do that to children though? Why do that to children?
But what I'm curious about, because you use the term chemical castration. Castration is a permanent thing. If you give someone an orchiectomy, as far as I'm aware, you can't undo it. You can't put the balls back on. You give someone Lupron, an adult, a child, a whomever, you take them off of it, it goes away. So I'm just like...
That's not true.
That's objectively
not true. That is not true. Okay? That is absolutely not true. You cannot sit here and say, for a fact, that it's totally fine to give Lupron to young kids, and that when they're adults, it will have no effects on them, and that they're
I'm not saying that.
And that their fertility will come back. You cannot say that. That is not true. And the only way to confirm something like that would be to do that to a whole bunch of kids and then just sit back and wait for like a decade or two to see how it works out. And my point is that to begin with, performing those kinds of Frankenstein butchery medical experiments on children is wrong, period.
Why?